The date was July 24, 1996. The time was 12:35 p.m. In Bowling Green, Kentucky, the summer sun was blazing. Children were out of school, enjoying their vacation. At the Colony Apartments, a group of kids were playing in the parking lot. Among them was a 7-year-old girl named Morgan Jade Violi. She had the biggest smile, her family would later say. She loved to laugh, dance, and sing. And when she grew up, she was going to be a veterinarian. But Morgan would never grow up. In just a few seconds, a monster would pull up in a maroon van, and Morgan's life would be ripped away. Her family's life would become a nightmare that lasted 30 years. This is the story of Morgan Jade Violi, the 7-year-old fighter who never gave up, and the 30-year journey to find the man who took her. The Colony Apartments in Bowling Green, Kentucky, was a typical low-income housing complex. Families lived close together. On that July day, Morgan was playing with her 6-year-old friend. They were running around the parking lot, enjoying the summer heat. Nothing seemed unusual. Nothing seemed dangerous. But someone was watching. A maroon Chevrolet van slowly entered the parking lot. It was an older model. The driver was a white male, maybe in his 20s. He had collar-length, sandy brown hair, a slender build, defined muscles, and a sharp, distinct nose. He watched the children play. He waited. He planned. Then he made his move. The van pulled up near the children. The driver reached out. First, he tried to grab Morgan's 6-year-old playmate, but the child moved away. He missed. Then he grabbed Morgan. He pulled her into the van. She screamed. She fought. She kicked. She was 7 years old, but she was a fighter. Witnesses would later say, Morgan fought. She screamed. She resisted. The van sped off towards Scottsville Road. In seconds, it was gone. And Morgan Violi had vanished from her life forever. The other children ran to their parents. Someone called 911. Within minutes, police were at the scene. But the maroon van was already miles away. The search begins. The Bowling Green Police Department launched an immediate search. Witnesses described the van, a 1978 maroon Chevrolet van. The driver, white male, 20 to 30 years old, sandy brown hair, slender build, distinctive nose. Police checked records. They learned that the van had been stolen from Dayton, Ohio, just days before. The theft occurred less than a mile from where the suspect's parents lived. 2 days after the abduction, on July 26, 1996, the van was found abandoned at a Union 76 truck stop in Franklin, Tennessee. It was empty. No Morgan, no suspect. But inside the van, investigators found evidence: hairs, fibers, traces of the monster who had taken Morgan. They sent it to the FBI lab, hoping for a DNA match. But in 1996, DNA technology was limited. The hairs were analyzed, but no match was found in any database. The case went cold. But investigators never stopped searching. The body in the woods. For 3 months, Morgan's family prayed. They hoped. They put up posters. They waited for their little girl to come home. On October 20th, 1996, that hope was shattered. A woman walking near her home in White House, Tennessee, made a horrifying discovery. In a wooded area near an old barn, she found skeletal remains. Police were called. The remains were identified as Morgan Jade Violi. She had been strangled. The medical examiner determined that her mouth had been covered, and she had been killed in the van. Her body then dumped in the woods. Witnesses later told police that on July 25, 1996, a white Ford van with a slatted trailer door-type window had been parked near that barn for nearly 4 hours. It was never identified. Morgan's family was devastated. But they made a promise. They would never stop fighting for justice. While Morgan's family grieved, the monster who took her was living a double life. His name was Robert Scott Froberg. In 1996, he was 32 years old. But he was already a career criminal with a long history. In December 1988, Froberg had committed an armed robbery in Montgomery, Alabama. He was convicted and sentenced to 40 years in prison. He was incarcerated in the Alabama prison system. But on April 3, 1996, Froberg escaped from a work detail. He fled to Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. On May 20, 1996, a 7-year-old boy in Mount Carmel reported a strange man hiding in a treehouse. Police came. They found Froberg. He was arrested and jailed in Northumberland County, Pennsylvania. But Froberg wasn't done escaping. On July 16, 1996, he climbed a rainspout to the roof of the jail, used a cable to climb down, and escaped again. 1 week later, he stole the maroon van from Dayton, Ohio, and 1 day after that, he abducted Morgan Violi. He was a ghost, a predator, and he was on the run. After killing Morgan, Froberg drove south to Huntsville, Alabama. He planned to hide with a male nurse he had met while in prison. The nurse had a pattern of providing money and assistance to inmates in exchange for sexual favors. Froberg stayed in Huntsville for about a week. Then he fled back to Pennsylvania. On August 21, 1996, he was arrested again. He was sent back to Alabama to finish his 40-year sentence for robbery. He added 15 years for escaping to run concurrently. For nearly 30 years, he sat in prison. He never mentioned Morgan. He never confessed. He thought he had gotten away with it. But he was wrong. Back in 1996, investigators had collected a strand of hair from the abandoned maroon van. They had also found a fiber in Morgan's hair that matched the van's seat cushion. The FBI lab tested the hair, but DNA technology at the time couldn't identify a match. For decades, the hair sat in evidence. Every few years, investigators would look at the case again. They would send the hair for new testing as technology improved, but nothing matched. In January 2026, the Bowling Green Police Department put out another call for tips. The FBI offered a $25,000 reward. They didn't know it, but they were about to get the break they had waited 30 years for. New advancements in forensic DNA testing had reached a level that earlier generations couldn't imagine. The FBI sent the strand of hair for testing again. This time, a DNA profile was extracted. It was entered into CODIS, the National DNA Database, and it matched. The DNA matched Robert Scott Froberg. He was 62 years old, still sitting in Kilby Correctional Facility in Alabama, serving his robbery sentence. He was scheduled for a parole hearing in January 2028. He thought he would walk free in a few years. He had no idea that the evidence from 1996 had just identified him. On Tuesday, February 24, 2026, a team of FBI agents and detectives traveled to the prison in Montgomery, Alabama. They sat down with Froberg in an interview room. They told him about the DNA match. Froberg's face changed. He knew the game was up. Then he did something no one expected. He confessed. The truth comes out. Froberg told investigators everything. He admitted that after escaping Pennsylvania, he stole a maroon van in Dayton. Driving south on I-65 to Huntsville, he exited in Bowling Green to buy marijuana. He ended up at the Colony Apartments. He saw Morgan playing, grabbed her, and put her in the van. U.S. Attorney Kyle Bumgarner would later say, "Morgan fought. She screamed. She resisted. Morgan was a fighter." Froberg drove south into Tennessee, pulling off the interstate in White House. He went into the back of the van. He covered her mouth, strangled her, causing her death there. Then he dumped her body in the woods near a barn. He cleaned the van and abandoned it. He drove to Huntsville, hid with a nurse, then returned to Pennsylvania, arrested weeks later. He had kept this secret for 30 years, but the DNA didn't lie. On Thursday evening, February 26, 2026, FBI agents knocked on Morgan's family's door. Her parents, her two older sisters. They had waited 30 years for this moment. U.S. Attorney Bumgarner said, "They've waited far too long for answers." Morgan's mother spoke that night. Morgan was more than the worst thing to happen to her. She was a daughter, a little sister. She had the biggest smile. She loved to laugh, dance, and sing. And when she grew up, she was going to be a veterinarian. For 30 years, they wondered, feared her killer lived among them. For 30 years, they fought for justice. Now, answers. On Friday, February 27, 2026, U.S. Attorney Kyle Bumgarner held a press conference. Morgan's family sat in the front row. Tears streamed down their faces. For years, the community feared Morgan's abductor lived silently among us, Bumgarner said. We feared one of our kids might be next. I hope this announcement gives comfort. He announced Robert Scott Froberg was charged with kidnapping resulting in death. He faced life in prison or the death penalty. Today is not about Froberg, Bumgarner said. Today is about Morgan Violi, a 7-year-old daughter and sister who remained in our hearts. FBI's Will Kurtz added, not a week has gone by in 30 years without tips. This reflects the community's commitment to finding justice for Morgan. Throughout the press conference, one phrase was repeated. Morgan was a fighter. She fought when grabbed. She screamed. She resisted. Even at 7, she didn't give up. And in a way, she never stopped fighting. Her case never died. Investigators never stopped. Her family never stopped. The evidence she left behind her, fibers waited 30 years to speak. Morgan fought, and in the end, she won. Froberg will never walk free. He will die in prison. And Morgan's family can finally begin to heal. One question haunts this case. If DNA technology had been advanced enough in 1996, Froberg would have been caught immediately. He would have been convicted decades ago. Morgan's family wouldn't have waited 30 years, but technology wasn't ready. So the evidence sat and waited, and finally, in 2026, it spoke. How many other cases are sitting in evidence rooms, waiting for technology to catch up? How many other families are waiting for answers? How many other fighters like Morgan are waiting for justice? The FBI now has new tools, new technology, new hope. Morgan's case is solved, but thousands of others remain unsolved, waiting, like Morgan waited, like her family waited. The fight isn't over. Morgan Jade Violi was 7 years old when she was taken. She loved to laugh, dance, and sing. She wanted to be a veterinarian. She never got that chance. But her name will never be forgotten. Her fight will never be forgotten. Thanks to DNA evidence, her killer will never walk free. As U.S. Attorney Bumgarner said, looking at Morgan's family, Morgan, today is for you. Rest in peace, Morgan. You were a fighter, and you won.